intellectual conversation. Saurabh Mukherjee's book, Unusual Billionaires, describes successful businesses via a common theme. Using John Kay's famous framework of innovation, reputation, architecture, and strategic assets, Mukherjee explains the success stories of 7 Indian companies. And as a part of this special series, CNBC TV 18's Lata Venkatesh caught up with Paresh Suthankar, the Deputy MD of HDFC Bank, and Saurabh Mukherjee of Ambit Capital. Here's an excerpt of that conversation.
I think it was logical for us to kick off our business as a corporate bank. A couple of reasons. One, there was clearly this gap from a corporate treasurer's point of view, where they were dealing with public sector banks and foreign banks. Clearly, the public sector banks had the local currency funding capability, while the foreign banks had the product range, the technology, the service. And we positioned ourselves right there in the middle, combining the strengths of an Indian public sector bank and a foreign bank. So it was really, a best of both. Having done that, you did realize, of course, that corporate customers will give you lower interest rates. I mean, the yields are lower. And therefore, the only way you can be profitable is to reduce your cost of funds. And the volatility that you see in being dependent on the markets for funding is clearly not a happy place to be. So it was logical for us then to transition from being a corporate bank, of course, on the lending side, to building a retail franchise which would give us a stable and hopefully a lower cost deposit base. So that was clearly our first entry into retail, was on the back of the deposit franchise. Before, of course, we also went into retail lending.
Okay. Now, Saurabh, at that time, we really don't have so much by way of technology. And it would have been, even at that time, expensive to put so many branches. In your experience, what made them click? That without having as many branches as even the smaller PSU banks would have, how did they manage the retail piece? Collecting deposits cannot have been easy.
Yeah, so I think what's very interesting about HDFC Bank is so much of what they do now, we take as granted in our day-to-day lives. So, for example, I work in a stockbroking firm. We use, we obviously help our clients trade on the NSE and the BSE. We're helping clients clear trades. We use HDFC Bank, so do all our competitors, right? So the entire stock market uses HDFC Bank, and what people like me who've only entered the trade in the last decade or so don't realize is in the late 90s, when HDFC Bank went to the NSE and the BSE and said, we will help you run a seamless clearing and settlement process with online visibility to how much money needs to be cleared by each broker, that was a complete first in our country. No other bank had done that. Similarly, Lata, the fact that we get our salaries deposited directly into our accounts across the country, HDFC Bank came up with the concept. What this bank was able to do very successfully in the late 90s was use the then available technology and apply it in a certain way which allowed corporates to bank across the country, especially corporates who were dispersed across the country, to bank across the country with one bank and electronically transfer cash in a way that simply wasn't possible until HDFC Bank made that innovation possible. That established the fundamentals of Indian retail banking as we know it today, and I don't think it's something that a lot of people realize, and I don't think they credit HDFC Bank with that degree of innovation.
Okay. So there are two things that HDFC Bank appears to have contributed to the banking lexicon: core banking and CASA, making it so important to have low-cost deposits. But Mr. Suthankar, there are three words that stand out in the description of your bank. Saurabh titles his book, his chapter, HDFC Bank, The Power of Textbook Execution. And the seminal sentence he says is, as simple as it sounds, execution has made HDFC Bank stand apart from other banks. One of your rivals who greatly respects you called you the SOP bank. According to them, everything is an SOP, and therefore HDFC Bank doesn't make mistakes. How do you explain this? How is it that you all stood out on execution?
Well, I think, we first of all recognize that the market opportunity is genuinely large. Okay, so we believe that, India is an underpenetrated market. And when you have that size and the economy is growing and that creates banking opportunities, if you accept that, then it's really left to you to define what segments you really want to serve, and then we become an execution story. Anybody who has, a reasonable strategy in place, has the product range, obviously you need the brand, the distribution, the technology, the people, and then that really boils down to execution. frankly, if you look at the strategies of different banks, everybody talks about focusing on a few things, right? Low cost of deposits, a certain asset franchise, fees, low NPLs. I mean, I think the commercial banking is not a very complex business in terms of the strategy or the, what you should be doing. And therefore, the gap between what you think you should be doing and what you actually do is execution. And frankly, I think, in many ways, the ultimate compliment you can give to a bank is that you're executing these little small things right? It's the detail is really what really makes a difference, especially in retail and perhaps true in wholesale as well. And maybe in some ways, I think the other piece which people tend to talk about us, which is being a little boring, helps in the fact that we are a little more consistent, and execution is therefore certainly a forte for us.
All right, that's a very interesting piece of conversation.